Welcome to an Echo of the Past channel. I am Matilda of Tuscany, a woman who was not afraid to stand up to the emperor, fought in battles in full armour, and changed the history of the Middle Ages. Today, I'll tell you the story of how I went from a little Tuscan countess to the most powerful woman in Europe, deciding the fate of popes and emperors. Get ready for a medieval drama full of wars, intrigue, and one very famous visit to Canossa. I am Matilda, and I was born in 1046 in Mantua, the daughter of Boniface III, Margrave of Tuscany and Beatrice of Lorraine. From birth, I was surrounded by wars. Italy was torn between the Pope, the Emperor, and the local rulers like a rag between dogs. My father Boniface was one of Italy's most powerful men, but also one of its most hated. He had more enemies than a flea dog, and they were all waiting for the opportunity to kill him. They got that chance in 1052, when I was just 6 years old. My father was murdered by his own men while hunting. Imagine, a little girl who overnight became heir to vast territories. My mother Beatrice was a strong woman, but she was in a difficult situation. A widow with a small child in the middle of hostile territories. That was a challenge for every ambitious man in the area. So she quickly remarried to Gothfried the Bearded, Duke of Lorraine. Gothfried was an interesting man. On the one hand, a powerful warrior, on the other, a politician who could play all sides. He became my stepfather and my teacher in the art of war and diplomacy. From him I learned that in politics there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests. I grew up in castles among soldiers, learning to ride a horse, use a sword, and most importantly, to rule. Even as a child, I knew that one day I would have to fight for my rights. No man would give them to me for free. In 1069, when I was 23, my stepfather became Gothfried. Suddenly I found myself the sole ruler of vast territories, from Tuscany to Emilia to parts of Lombardy. I was one of the most powerful people in Italy, but also one of the most tempting targets. Everyone expected me to quickly find a husband to rule in my place, but I had other plans. I decided to rule alone and show the world that a woman can be as good a ruler as a man, maybe even better. My first big challenge came in the form of investiture, a dispute over who had the right to appoint bishops. Pope Gregory VII claimed that only the Church could appoint ecclesiastical dignitaries. Emperor Henry IV said it was his right as monarch. And I had to decide which side to take. It was like choosing between two angry bulls. Both were powerful, both were dangerous, both wanted my support. But I chose the Pope. Why? First, because I was a devout Catholic, and second, because the Pope was far away in Rome while the Emperor was dangerously close. This decision changed my life forever. I became a daughter of the Church, a defender of the papacy and an enemy of the Emperor. It was an all-or-nothing bet, and I never liked safe bets. In 1069, I married Gothfried Humpty, the son of my stepfather. Yes, you read that right, I married my stepfather's son. Nowadays this would cause a scandal, but in the Middle Ages it was a normal political arrangement. Gothfried was, well, let's put it diplomatically, he was no Adonis. He was short, hunchbacked, and had the temper of an angry badger. But he was a skilled warrior and politician, which I needed more than a pretty face. Our marriage was purely political. I needed a man to help me hold territory. He needed a woman with powerful lands. It was a business transaction wrapped in a wedding dress. Romance. We didn't even talk about that. Gothfried spent most of his time waging war in Lorraine. I ruled Italy. It was an ideal marriage, each of us doing what we did best and not getting in each other's way. Sometimes he'd meet in a castle, we'd discuss politics, then he'd go off to fight again. In 1076, she gave birth to my daughter Beatrice. I finally had an heiress, but the joy didn't last long. Gothfried died in battle in 1076. I was a widow again, but this time more experienced and determined than ever. There was no turning back now. I was alone against the world, but I had an army, money, and an unwavering belief in my cause. The year 1077, the moment that made me famous forever. Pope Gregory VII excommunicated Emperor Henry IV over an investiture dispute. Henry found himself trapped. Without the Pope's blessing, the German princes did not have to obey him. And where do you think the Emperor decided to seek forgiveness? In my castle of Canossa. Imagine the irony. The most powerful man in Europe coming to beg for mercy in the castle of a woman he previously despised. In January 1077, in the middle of a bitter winter, Henry IV arrived at the gates of Canossa. But I wouldn't let him in. For 3 days he stood at the gates in penitence, barefoot, in a sackcloth shirt, in the cold. It was the most famous time out in history. There were dramatic negotiations inside the castle. Pope Gregory VII was my guest, and I was the mediator between him and the Emperor. I had the power to decide the fate of Europe. Sometimes I feel like a referee in a boxing match between two giants. I finally persuaded the Pope to accept the Emperor. Henry was forgiven, but at the cost of great humiliation. All Europe was talking about how a powerful woman made the Emperor kneel in the snow. Going to Canossa became a proverb for humiliating surrender, and I was the one who made it possible. I wasn't just a witness to history, I was its maker. After Canossa, Henry IV thought he had won. How wrong he was. As soon as he got back to Germany, he started fighting the Pope again, and I sided with the Church with full force. In 1081, Henry invaded Italy with a huge army. This time it was no diplomatic game, it was a war to the death. And I decided to fight in person in full armour. Imagine the scene. A 40-year-old woman in shining armour, on a war horse, leading an army against imperial odds. My soldiers loved me. They called me Matilda the warrior and would follow me to hell. Henry conquered Rome and installed his counter-pope. But I didn't give up. I marched out with an army and began to systematically reclaim the lost territories. It was guerrilla warfare, quick attacks, sieges of castles, endless manoeuvring. The most famous was the Battle of Sorbara in 1084. I personally led the charge against the imperial forces and won. Have you ever seen a woman in her 40s in full armour, sword in hand, attacking enemy lines? My enemies did, and they never forgot it. Henry had to retreat back to Germany. I did something incredible. I defeated the Holy Roman Emperor. And all this as a woman in a world where women were supposed to be quiet and obedient. In 1089, at the age of 43, I did something that shocked all of Europe. I married 17-year-old Guelfo Fib Bavarian. Imagine the gossip in medieval courts. Did you hear? That old Matilda married a boy who could be her son. Why did I do that? First, I needed an ally against the Emperor, and the Guelfs were his most bitter enemies. Second, I wasn't as old as I sounded. 43 in the Middle Ages was like 30 today. And third, who says a woman can't have a younger husband? Guelfo was a handsome young man, but also an ambitious politician. Our marriage was again a combination of reason and, let's just say, physical attraction was not lacking. I finally had a husband with whom I could spend time not only discussing military strategy, but the happiness didn't last long. Guelfo had other ideas about marriage. He thought he was going to be the ruler of my territories. When he found out I wasn't going to hand over power, he started acting like a spoiled child. In 1095, our marriage broke up. Guelfo went back to Bavaria, and I was left alone. But this time it wasn't a tragedy, it was a relief. I could finally rule without having to explain my decisions to a man. I was 49 years old, and I was finally truly free. And you know what? It was the best time of my life. In 1102, I made a decision that would affect European politics for centuries to come. I donated all my territories to the papacy. Imagine the shock, one of the most powerful women in Europe giving away her wealth. Why did I do it? First, because I had no male heir, my daughter Beatrice died young, and because I wanted to ensure that my lands never fell into the hands of the Emperor, and also because I was a devout Catholic. But I wasn't stupid. In the deed of gift, I reserved the right to rule until my death. So I remained ruler, but with the Pope's blessing. It was a brilliant political combination. Emperor Henry V, son of the one from Canossa, was furious. He knew that after my death, my territories would become papal and he would lose them forever. He started planning an invasion, but I was ready. My donation became the foundation of the papal state, which existed until the 19th century. Imagine, one woman's decision affected the map of Europe for 8 centuries. Some historians say I was naive, but I believe I was a visionary. I saw a future where the Church would be independent of secular power, and I did everything I could to make that vision a reality. The last 20 years of my life were a constant battle. Henry V was constantly attacking my territory, but I fought back like a lioness. Even at the age of 70, I was still leading troops into battle. In 1110, Henry attempted a major invasion. He thought the old woman would be an easy target. How wrong he was. I defeated him at Brescello and forced him to retreat. I was 64 years old and still invincible. But the years were taking their toll. Gradually, I handed over the administration of the territory to my deputies, but I still oversaw every important decision. Until the end, I remained ruler. On July 1115, I died in the castle of Bondeno di Roncore. I was 69 years old, and I had ruled for 46 years. To my last breath, I fought for my convictions. My funeral was a state event. Popes, bishops, princes came from all over Europe. They all came to pay tribute to a woman who changed the history of the Middle Ages. I was buried in the Cathedral of San Benedetto Po, but my legacy lives on. The papal state I founded became the foundation of modern Italy. My example inspired generations of strong women. Sometimes I think I lived too soon. In modern times, a woman like me could be president or prime minister. But even in the Middle Ages, I proved that gender is no barrier to greatness. My life has been one long struggle for independence. Independence of the Church, independence of women, independence of conscience. I fought against emperors, led armies, decided the fate of Europe. And all this as a woman in a world where women were supposed to be invisible. I was the great countess, daughter of the Church, Matilda the warrior. But above all, I was a woman who was not afraid to dream big dreams and fight to make them come true. Don't forget to subscribe to the Voices from the Past channel and give a like if my story has inspired you. History is full of strong women who changed the world. They're just not talked about enough. The past whispers, the future listens.